Now we come to our next speaker, Dr. Wong and Huat, again another household name. They're all household names here. And he has been at it for a long time. We are proud to say he's a former lecturer in Monash, in Sunway. Give him a clap, those from Monash especially. You see what Monash and what Sunway can do. Now, he is the head of the political studies program at Penang, where Professor Wu also has very strong links and was closely connected. He's concentrated on federalism, elective systems. He did his PhD at University of Essex, and he continues to be involved in the Barisan, and he has obviously succeeded in contributing to this tidal wave. Prof, go ahead.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Good evening, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Professor Wu and Sunway University to invite me. I can be quite dangerous to university, you know. Now, I want to start with 2 points. One is that it's really about system, not personalities. Even though that Najib and Rosma contribute a lot to the public discontent that bring down UMNO's rule of 61 years, we must not mistake them to be the root cause. They are only the symptoms. Second is that it's politics, not just policy. I know many well-intended people like to focus on policy as if you can ignore politics, but if you cannot get the dynamics right, you're eventually going to get bad policies again. So reform is not about suppressing politics, but it's about making politics work, like economics is about making market works. So making them work is very much about understanding and responding with the right incentive to the human nature, including tribalism, obsession with ethnicities and religion. This is the point I want to stress because people like to get into this euphoria mode to think that we move on and so on. I'm very glad that Ben just now gave us a reminder that the problem is not, that the problems are not really out yet. Now, and in that sense, democracy is not about building a heaven on earth with angels in and devils out, or a rehabilitation camp to preach devils into angels, but about finding ways for flawed humans driven by self-interest to get things done in most inclusive compromises. I think we need to be very, very pragmatic, and I'll come to that a bit more later. My sharing really is about unpacking Barisan Nasional. What does it stand for? What does it stood for? What it stood for, not because we are not talking about, reform should not be about replacing Pakatan Harapan, replacing Barisan Nasional, but to transcend Barisan Nasional. So what is really Barisan Nasional? What was the Barisan Nasional model? I call it an electoral one-party state, and maybe the best way to describe this is to actually quote the words from Najib's father. He said that, Tun Abdul Razak said that in 1971, in front of Commonwealth parliamentarians, he said, the view we take is that democratic government is the best and most acceptable form of government. So long as the form is preserved, the substance can be changed to suit conditions of a particular country. In other words, change democracy into a party state, but keep elections as the ornament. And that's what we have for 49 years. And that system is not destroyed. It is just merely halted for now. and to really prevent Pakatan Rakyat from becoming the new Barisan Nasional or Barisan Nasional 2.0, we need to begin with understanding and unpacking what Barisan Nasional was or is. For me, it meant three things. One, this is a one-party state, as I say. The difference between Malaysia and China is way much more honest. They are a one-party state and they don't pretend to be a democracy. And what I mean by one-party state, of course, is suppressions of external competition, suppressions of opposition and critiques from civil society. This is about selective prosecution, about draconian law, about partisan discrimination, which we still see in the states run by Pakatan Rakyat, where opposition lawmakers do not get the same amount of money or not offer at all. And the same thing is threatening to happen in Johor. Good that we have Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin telling off the Johor Menteri Besar that you cannot do things the old way. But that's part of the problem, and many of us would know I'm not going to that part. I want to touch on two other things that is very essential to what Barisan Nasional is. One, the second thing is permanent coalition. This is a permanent coalition. What it means is that all parties will only contest. All parties from the coalition will sort out the seats so that only one party from the coalition will contest one constituency. The problem with that is that seats are then fixed according to the parties. And the problem with that, following that, is that you always have seat dispute every elections because there's no mechanism to allow the allies to compete among themselves, to reward component parties that do better at the expense of those who do less. There's no mechanism to allow competition internally that caused Barisan Nasional to decline in the long run. Because you cannot promote, you cannot hold people to be accountable. Because the party who loses in constituency, the same constituency will still be given the same constituency until there is an arrangement to swap constituency. Now, how did Barisan Nasional overcome that problem for so long that it took until May 9 for it to be rejected? The simple answers are redonation. With gerrymandering and malapportionment, you do away your voters' power to unseat you. If democracy is about voters choosing their politician, gerrymandering is politicians choosing their voters. But there's another way. There's another tool that is very powerful, and this has been disabled this time, which I believe is one of the reasons why we see what we saw on May 9. The second weapon for Barisan Nasional was seat increase. Malaysian parliament would grow like a teenager by 14% in average every 2 elections. By increasing seats, by adding seats to the map, you can easily carve out seats to make sure that not only that you have an advantage over your opposition, but more importantly, you take away the cost of infighting. Because you basically overcome the problem with your inability to deal with internal competition. And that had been done all the time, but this round it was stopped by Bersih. The opposition were actually agreeing to the idea of seat increase. It was Bersih who stopped it because the way that seats were added were never done right. They were always add the seats unconstitutionally to the proposal in delineation before amending constitutional provision for the very simple reason they do not want people to realize, to ask the question, why are seats not allocated proportionally according to the size of electorate to different states? Why is it that Pahang and Johor get more seats in the past than Selangor? The question was never asked because politicians and the publics were driven into the delineation process, and after months, you sign up to the outcome and you don't ask the question when Article 46 that determines the size of constituencies, the allocations of seats was finally amended. So that was the important thing, that how this worked. But there's another problem following permanent collation, and we saw it this round. The problem is that you have, exactly because constituency have to be fixed by party leaders, constituency have to be allocated between component parties. That make it completely impossible for you to have bottom-up selections of candidates. Because every party would have more divisions than the constituency they want to contest. In other words, you would have talents coming from constituency you never have a chance to contest, that you need to put in to constituency where you have the chance to contest, but you don't have the better people. That gives the power to party headquarters to coordinate. And that coordination power is exactly why you see so many substandard candidates being put up. Or some of them are actually good candidates, but they never get a chance to really be tested and accepted by the ground. The very reason that Wan Saifu, I wish he's still here, but he probably is gone home. The very reason Wan Saifu, we cannot have someone as smart as Wan Saifu in our parliament is exactly because he was moved from Titiwangsa to Padang after he worked on the ground for 3 weeks. You cannot avoid this problem next election. The same thing would happen. Very simple reason. Because as long as constituency need to be allocated according to parties in an almost permanent manner, the power to select candidates is transferred from the hands of voters to party HQ, from party local branches to party HQ. And you cannot count on party HQ not to count on for the party HQ to always put the most competitive candidates on the ground, because they are factional consideration. And that's the reason why you saw the hoo-ha just 2 days before nomination with PKR candidates. It is structural. It's not just because some people are bad, some factional leaders are selfish. No, this is a flawed system. Now, the third thing that what Barisan Nasional represent is consociationalism. It's a bit of mouthful, but in Malaysia, you can understand that as 2 things. One, this is about inter-communal power sharings, that you have every community represented in the government. Wan Saifu is here. I just voice out justice for you. I say that with the current system, that's the reason why he has to be taken out from Titiwangsa and parachuted in Padang, and therefore we cannot have a good parliamentarian like him. So going back to consociationalism, what it means in Malaysia is that this is internal communal power sharing, meaning that every community will get some representation in the government, so you will not feel excluded. But on what basis? On the basis of communal unity. So you would have UMNO telling Malays and say, the Malays need to be united and to vote for Barisan Nasional. And MCA would say the Chinese have to be united to vote for Barisan Nasional. But what do they really call for? What's the point of unity? The point of unity is not foreign invasion. We are not fighting a liberation war here. The threat is each other. What UMNO fear is Chinese and Indian. What MCA fear is Malays. But in a very perverted way, that UMNO would call for Malays to vote for MCA, our Chinese, because they are less problematic than the other Chinese, DAP. The same way, MCA would tell the Chinese and say, the Chinese cannot afford to be divided. You have to vote for us, but also vote for UMNO, because that's our Malay. They are more moderate. You cannot, otherwise, you would end up having the worst Malay in past. And on that list, they added Anwar Ibrahim, after Anwar Ibrahim left the government, and later on, and recently they added Mahathir. The simple way is that this so-called consociationalism is not genuine power sharing. There is no ground to the resolutions of ethnic tension. In fact, I would compare this, the situation, to a cat that has learned rational choice theory in University Hall. Imagine a cat can think rationally and act strategically. The cat would not eliminate every rat in the house, but it will make sure the rat populations come under control. Because if the rat populations goes out of control, the cat would be thrown out of the house. But however, if all the rats are eliminated, the cat cannot afford to make any mistake. It can be thrown out of the house as well. So the point with the problem, the simmering problems surrounding ethnicities and religion is really because the goal of ethnic relation management in this country, the goals are, one, to make sure it never goes out of control. Second, to make sure it never goes out of fashion. And if you do not get out of this way, if we were to think all the problem is because you have the bad guys in UMNO and MCA, we are bound to have the same problem coming back less than 5 years' time. It's a system that drives people to do what they do. Most people do not have autonomy. Most people are not saints. Neither are they villains. They are just self-interested individuals, driven by or in response to incentives that put to them. And I want to point out on this point, let me check my time. I want to point out on this that when people talk about Islamization in this country, the simplest way you think is to think that this is a past problem, and UMNO was a savior. That was old-fashioned, I know. Or to think that this is really about theology. No, it's not about a theological position, per se. It is very much a response to how Barisan Nasional works. In fair defense to past, I think Hadi Awang was a brilliant politician. In the atmosphere after 1969, UMNO consolidated its power on the ground that Malays need to be united. Now, if Malay unity was the order of the day, then no Malay-based opposition should exist. They should all just join with UMNO. And after PAS being kicked out from Kelantan in 1977, PAS was at its lowest point. It needed to justify why people should support the party and its cause. And Hadi Awang, in response to that, came out with the famous or infamous Amanat Hadi. The relevant line was this: we oppose Barisan Nasional not because they were long in power. We oppose them because they preserve the colonial constitution, the infidel laws, and the pre-Islamic rules. That explains why we actually have hudud and so on. Why this country politics is defined by the idea to restore a pre-colonial order characterized by Muslim dominance and Sharia rule. So I'll go very, very quickly in about 2 minutes on where do we go out of here. Before that, very briefly, what's wrong with the system? Why do we have Barisan Nasional in place? It's not just because of the social divide, but because of the systemic mismatch between first past the post and our divided society. It is a mismatch because that we have coalition politics. As long as you have wood swapping arrangement, you cannot avoid the problem of a permanent coalition under the system. Second, it's a mismatch because first past the post is highly volatile. Every elections, you cannot tell what's the outcome. 1969 was not a Chinese tsunami in today's word. It was a Malay tsunami. It was the electoral system that delivered the outcome that looked like a Chinese tsunami and eventually led to the riot. Our election is like a big gamble every 5 years. How do you expect people to remain calm and cool when you have to put everything on bet? What's the solution? The solution is move away to a proportional system, and I would advocate the German system where every voter is given 2 votes, one to vote for your constituency representative as what we have now, and the other vote is to vote for party representative who would come in a list. That's why the system is called party list, and you could have your quota for ethnic minorities, for gender, for women, for other minorities. And why this is important? Because then we can allow allies to vote, to compete. You can vote for the party directly. So there is a competitive element. Second, the parties need to choose the most competitive, I'm coming to that. The party need to choose the most competitive candidate because otherwise they can be punished at the constituency contest. Thirdly, it would allow post-election coalition. That means party may form coalition after election. And why this is important? One, you don't make unnecessary enemies because you may have to choose to team up with people you oppose. So that moderate politics. Second, on the other hand, in order to differentiate from your opponents, you need product differentiation. That makes party to invest in manifesto and policy, to develop think tank, to make what the election promise real. So this is the direction eventually we need to push. And if there is any good thing for a talk of electoral system, is no better time than now. Why? Because Malays are divided into 5 parties, excluding the AP. A first past the post system would work when the majority group concentrate their support in one party. In a situation now, it is best in Malay interest and for national interest for us to move on to a less risky system like the German mixed member proportional system. Thank you.
Dr. Wong, I like your theory of the cats and the rats. But maybe you should also pursue this idea. Would Pakatan be able to push for a proportional voting system? I mean, that could be the solution to the collusion theory.